We should probably do some sort of introduction. Like, hi, everybody. I'm Patricia.
I'm Lee.
And we're weird as fuck.
Yeah, I suppose you probably should, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Because someday we might be famous. Okay. So. All right. Let's give that a shot again.
Anal probe.
Really? Do you have to go there every time?
You said I could say it.
I thought there was going to be no more anal probing after we finished that episode.
Okay.
Although it has been one of our more popular episodes.
You want more.
I don't think they want more. I don't think anybody wants more of that. I really don't.
You don't.
No.
But your fans do.
I think calling them fans is a rather over-exaggeration.
Listeners. Is that better?
The people who have chosen to waste away some of their day with us.
Mm-hmm.
Laughing ridiculously. And speaking of people who are wasting their time online, apparently I need to record a clarification. We did have a complaint about our hysterical laughter over Dragula and the shot callers. Remember that?
Yep.
Yep. Someone accused us of being homophobic because we were laughing at drag queens being shocked.
We are not.
In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. In reality, we're sadistic. And we found the idea of someone deliberately allowing themselves to be dog shocked for our entertainment was hysterical. And we spent quite some time debating which of our coworkers we would hook up to one of those devices. So
Yeah, I've seen lots of videos online, too, of people get shocked. It doesn't matter who it is. It's
just funny as shit. Yeah, I've watched a few of those videos too. So yes, for clarification purposes, it had nothing to do with the fact that it was drag queens, although that did add a little bit of an air of hilarity to it, because they were funny anyway. I mean, deliberately funny, not that we're laughing at people just because they're different from us, but they were attempting to be humorous and they were succeeding. But also just the whole visual was just spectacular and I applaud them and it was wonderful. And I will probably watch that episode again. But yes, so for you out there whose name I don't remember because it doesn't matter, we're not homophobic and get over yourself. It was funny. It was supposed to be funny. So moving on to things that actually matter.
Yes.
Not the opinion of random trolls online. Although I did feel like if somebody felt that way about us, that, you know, I want to clarify. I don't want people to think that we hate anybody, any group in general, certain people in particular, but I don't hate anybody. I just thought it was a really hilarious episode and it was intended to be hilarious. So well done. Well done, Boulet Brothers. Well done. Anyway, moving on. This week, we're talking about something really weird, really widespread, and something that I think you probably have never heard of before. Today, we're going to talk about Earth's vile vortices.
Okay, I don't even know what the fuck that is.
Yeah, I know. That's why I picked it. So I've actually been working on this one for a little while. And for as long as I've been working on it, I feel like it should be really over the top spectacular and like 16 episodes long. But the reality is some of these I had some trouble coming up with really in-depth information on. And it was really frustrating. And then, of course, the world caught fire and I got distracted. You know how it is. But I found this topic to be really, really interesting, and I thought you would too. And I'm going to delve deeper into each of these vortices as we move on. But right now, I'm going to talk about what they are, where they are, and some examples of why these places of power caught the attention of researchers. Okay. All right. So one of the biggest names, old school, in paranormal research and basically the study of all things supernatural, cryptids, etc., was Ivan T. Sanderson. In 1972, which was a couple of years ago, he coined the term vile vortices to refer to 12 points on the globe where anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field created what he called devil's graveyards. So he noted that in certain areas on the planet, there's a much, much larger degree of destruction to human beings and crafts. He also noted that in these areas were a greater proportion of the Earth's super colonies, if you will, societies that were far more advanced than one would expect them to be. So Sanderson, like a lot of parapsychologists, was really interested in learning everything that he could about the mysterious disappearances that were widely published. It seemed like in the 60s and 70s, we were really kind of at our heyday for all things sort of dark and supernatural, including serial killers. We'll talk about that another time. These areas that he pinpointed see hundreds of planes, ships, and people go missing over a period of centuries, far more than we see in other places on the globe. It was his wish to understand what was causing these anomalies. Now, human beings have been sailing the oceans, as far as anthropologists know, for about 15,000 years. So one would expect that fairly evenly scattered across the globe, we'd have lots of shipwrecks.
Depends on where the storms are.
It depends on where the storms are.
Stuff like that.
Right. But he found a concentration just above and just below the equator. And it could be because of, one would assume that it could be because of, more ships sailing in these more temperate areas. It could be because warmer waters mean stronger storms. Although the North Atlantic gets some pretty violent storms every year. We know that. But what he learned, so far as his research was able to guide him, was that there were 12 vortices spread at equidistant points around the globe. 10 located along the equatorial region of the Earth, 5 on the Tropic of Cancer, 5 on the Tropic of Capricorn, and 1 at the North Pole, 1 at the South Pole. So 12 altogether. When these were overlapped with a 3D map of the globe, he made an interesting discovery. Together, they created, and forgive me because I don't use this word very often, an icosahedron. Icosahedron.
Yeah, everybody knows what that is.
That's a big one. I have a definition. It's a 20-sided shape, like a Dungeons and dice. You know the role-playing dice that you have? So imagine a 20-sided die. So if you took a 3D map of these vile vortices and overlaid it over one of these dice, you would see 12 points that were equidistant, that lined up right on the corners of the dice.
That's weird.
It is weird. Which is why this caught his attention. He believed that rather than a paranormal explanation, that the high frequency of uncommon occurrences in these regions was due to hot and cold air and ocean currents that crossed these vortices, creating uncommon magnetic fields. Which sounds kind of out there.
Like all the other places that are coming up, the triangles everywhere. Well, one in Alaska, and then, of course, the Bermuda Triangle.
Right, but think about how close the Alaska Triangle is to the North Pole. And the Bermuda Triangle is actually one of our vortices, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. In 1973, Soviet scientists caught wind of his studies and thought to themselves, there may be something here. And you know how it was during the Cold War. Anything the U.S. was doing, the USSR got their hands into because they had to see if there was anything to it, and vice versa. Think of things like, Project Majestic and the remote viewing projects and some of the shit that we just convinced them to do because, we could. So Soviet scientists got wind of Mr. Sanderson's research and they decided to look into it as well. They took his findings and overlaid them over a copy of the planetary grid. Now, I've shown you pictures of the planetary grid. So it's essentially, imagine a map of the Earth overlaid onto graph paper, like an engineer would use to create designs or write equations.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found, they published in their article called "Is the Earth a Large Crystal?" Simple, effective title. I like it. Points. And forgive me again, these are Russian names and my Russian is bad. Nikolai Goncharov, Vyacheslav Morochov, and Valery Markarov. And if I'm wrong, don't tell me because that's as good as it gets, folks, postulated that the planet was covered by a matrix of cosmic energy. They believed that these 12 vortices corresponded with 12 five-sided plates laid out over the planet's surface. In their article, they claimed that any 3 of these plates overlapped, 62 junctions in all, humanity saw an increase in not only quote unquote supernatural activity, so things that we can't explain. Supernatural doesn't necessarily mean witchcrafty or anything alien or magical or any sort of nonsense like that. It means beyond natural, beyond what we understand to be in the natural world. So they saw an increase in not only supernatural activity, but also advanced civilizations.
So being in it makes you smarter.
Well,
if you don't die.
Well, there's a lot of potential for additional energy availability in these spaces. So their theory was that not only could you, obviously these are in temperate regions, so you'd have less harsh weather to deal with in the wintertime. So a lot of what happens in the north, the extreme north and the extreme south of the world kind of shuts down in the wintertime because you can't work outside. There's no agriculture. There's limited work with animals. There's limited building opportunities. So societies would tend to advance maybe more slowly than they potentially could in temperate regions. So they have that going for them. But also in these areas where there was more natural electromagnetic power, physics would work differently.
Okay.
You're looking at me blankly.
Yes.
So these researchers created a grid. They overlaid the map of the vortices that Sanderson had created and noted that near the vortices, they were more likely to find advanced civilizations and megalithic buildings. So when we think megaliths, we think Stonehenge. I didn't realize how many megaliths there are around the globe before I started doing some of this research. Now, I knew about the Egyptian pyramids. I knew about places like Pumapunku. Obviously, we know about Stonehenge, but there are megaliths in Africa as well that they didn't teach us about. And there are structures in the Caribbean underwater that are estimated to be 15 to 20,000 years old. Now, human beings weren't supposed to be able to build megalithic structures at that point in our history.
Yeah, well, our history is all fucked up.
I do think that's true. I'm not going to come out and say aliens did it. I do honestly believe in my heart of hearts that human civilization was far more advanced in the past than we give it credit for.
Well, they have all this proof of more advanced cultures, and they won't change the history books to save their fucking lives, so everything stays the same in school, even though there's all kinds of shit that says that that's bullshit.
Oh, don't even get me started about American history school.
Change it.
In school. There are southern states that still refer to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression. We do not change things quickly around here. And I'm glad that the scientific community doesn't jump onto every theory that comes out, because we'd look pretty foolish if they did. But when the evidence shows you without a shred of doubt that we were not mud-throwing cave dwellers 15,000 years ago, you have to stand up and take notice and stop asking and start asking the question, what were we? Why? What happened? What changed? Not, well, it doesn't really fit into our timeline, so we're just going to pretend that never happened. Okay. So they did this. And they were theorizing that these areas held natural electromagnetic power that made building the massive structures less difficult. So think about the Coral Castle in Florida. One man built this, moving multi-ton rocks by himself without heavy equipment. And he did it in town so people would have noticed cranes floating around. He did it at night so he couldn't be observed. But even then, to set up and dismantle a crane and hide away the evidence and move all those stones in one night would have been impossible for one man to do alone.
And he never told anybody.
How he did it. So these scientists theorized that these areas on the globe made that sort of construction simpler, more possible. Later on, a physicist named Nikolai Kosarev and a physician, Alexander Tomovov, apparently we don't study these things in the U.S.
Apparently.
Thank you, Russia, for getting on this, who had dug into the research about human consciousness and magnetic fields. Kosarev developed experiments that were designed to prove the existence of what he referred to as torsional energy fields. These, he claimed, travel faster than the speed of light. He referred to this field as the flow of time. Einstein referred to a similar concept as the ether, and others have called it ZPN, or zero-point energy. Now, you've watched a lot of sci-fi with me.
Yep.
Especially things like Stargate. And this has actually come up. So remember, science is inspired by science fiction, which is inspired by science. They sort of go hand in hand. And there's been several programs. Sorry about that. There have been several programs that have sort of explored the potential for zero-point energy. Kosarev believed that the past, the present, and the future existed simultaneously and could be accessed if you had the proper understanding and the means to do so. And this kind of folds back into our theories about ghosts and spirits, which we'll get into at some point later on, that apparitions may not be the actual spirits of the dead, but us viewing something from either the past or the future.
So they look like ghosts when they're there?
So, yeah. So maybe there's a glitch in the matrix or a thinness in the veil that separates those periods in time. He believed something similar. So you could potentially, maybe as a psychic or with the proper machinery, access that information. Think of the coronavirus visor. It's not the coronavirus. Damn it. Sorry for everybody who listened to that episode and thought I was talking about a disease being able to show you the future. It can't. Don't get it. I felt like such a dolt when I listened to that. So he thought that if you could prove the existence of such a power source and could somehow harness it, you'd be able to explain how otherworldly craft were able to move at such high speeds without sound that we would expect from such a powerful motor. So think about it. If you had access to ZPN, the ether, whatever you want to call it, you could potentially move a craft from point A to point Z in no time at all, because you're not actually propelling forward through space. You're moving through time.
Yeah, but nobody's proved any of this.
Well, there is a school of thought that there are people who believe that the UFOs that we see aren't alien craft. There are crafts from a different point in our history. So potentially what built the pyramids, I'm using that, don't hate me. What built the pyramids was not quote unquote alien forces, but potentially advanced craft that had been harnessed from the future to do work in the past.
Okay.
Way to spice up the conversation there, honey.
Yes, that's what you have me on here for.
I do.
They ever talk?
You're my straight man. You are. Okay. So he also hypothesized that the same phenomena could account for time slips. So if the past and future times were existing side by side, under the right conditions, one could step through the veil and exist, if even for a short time, in another place. And we'll get into time slips at another point. I've got some pretty fascinating stories that I think you're going to like of people who have stepped into a building, into an office, out of a building, gotten out of their car, and poof, everything was different. It wasn't as it should be now.
That would be weird.
That would be really weird. So he believed that the theory that we're existing past, present, and future could be explained through this ZPN, 0-point energy. Interestingly, he also found that when experimenting with remote viewing, when his subjects were further north away from the vortices, so closer to the North Pole, that their results were stronger. So they were more often correct than if they were closer to the equator.
More brain power.
Less electromagnetic interference. Think about it. We're electronic beings. We're not robots, but our brains fire electricity. Our hearts function on electricity. So much of what powers our inner workings is electric. So if we're closer to the equator, we have more interference in those systems and we have less access to maybe higher functions.
So we all need to live in vortices.
No, we need to live away from the vortices.
I thought it heightened it when they're in there.
Well, it heightened their ability to move big, heavy things.
Well, you said the psychic people did better in the vortices.
No. I said they did better when they were further north away from the vortices.
Okay.
So heavy stuff closer to vortices, also downed planes and shipwrecks. Psychic abilities further north.
Okay.
So the Nazis also did something similar with their bell experiment. You remember the Nazi bell?
Yep.
We talked about that a little bit when we were talking about Werner von Braun, who, again, for the record, was a fucking Nazi. The Soviet scientists weren't the first to embrace the idea of the grid, nor were they for the first to suggest that these points were connected to the Earth's own power. As far back as the time of Plato, philosophers and mathematicians postulated that the world's energetic grid was made up of a series of basic geometric designs. The tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron. I could go on, but there's a lot of hedrons in there. Those were associated with the 5 elements that made up the Earth's life-sustaining force. Now, of course, they had a different understanding of what made up Earth's forces than we did. And I'm not going to say that they were wrong, because we've been wrong about a lot of shit in the modern world. But I'm not sure how I feel about this one. They believe that within the grid, there were places of power where impossible events were commonplace. Of course, the ancient Greeks didn't know anything about the Western Hemisphere, and they had no idea of knowing what was on this side of the planet. They were focused on what they knew in their own discovered world. And that was a huge limitation on their part, because some of the more interesting stories happen in the open spaces in the Western Hemisphere. So where are these vortices located, you may ask?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, ask me. Okay.
Where are the vortices at, honey?
Okay. So as I mentioned, Sanderson found that they were located on the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Let me say that again without a weird Boston accent. The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn.
Boston.
I give up. It's Capricorn. I don't know what's happening to me. So as mentioned, there's 12. The Bermuda Triangle, known for unusual disappearances. Easter Island, megalithic stone carvings. The Zimbabwe megaliths. I did not know there were megaliths in Zimbabwe. The Devil's Sea, Hamakulia. Oh, wow, that was bad. Homunculia. Unusually high magnetic and volcanic activity. Megaliths in Algeria. Mohenjo-Daro. Advanced Rama Empire, so we have an advanced civilization there. The Wharton Basin. Tectonic and volcanic activity. It's called the Wallaby Fracture Zone. I kind of like that. The South Atlantic Anomaly, which we're going to have to do a whole show on because it sounds really cool. And the New Hebrides Trench near Fiji. And of course, there's also the North Pole and the South Pole, and that makes 12. Considering the history of weird events in these areas, he might be onto something. Because what we do find in these 10 areas, we're going to leave off the North and South Pole because those aren't really vile vortices, although they do have some strange things happening there. Each one mentioned above or before, or however you're reading this, they have their fair share of strangeness. And we're going to include some samples from each of these spaces in our next episode because we know you hate it when we go over 30 minutes. So tune in next week and I've got stories.
Because we have no patience.
I'm patient. I don't know what you're talking about.
We're in a hurry.
If you're on your commute and you're almost to work, tune in next week as we cover the 12 vile vortices and some of the strange events that happened there.
Bye.
Bye. Want to stay connected between shows? You can find us on Instagram at WeirdAsFCKPodcast, on Twitter at WeirdAsFuckPod1, on Facebook at WeirdAsFCKPodcast. Send us an email at weirdasfckkpodcast@gmail.com, or come on over to our website at www.weirdasfck.com. There you can check out our blog, pick up some merch, look over our sources, and even share your weird experiences. You might even make it on a future episode. We would love to hear from you. Until then, tune in and keep it weird.